In the previous video, I talked about initiation, and I spoke particularly about the formal initiations when you join an order, in which case what you do is prescribed and you do what you're told to do. Now I'm going to focus a bit more on the informal initiations, where either for yourself or with a small group of people you decide to get together and create an initiatory structure and carry it out. It can be done just on the level like that, but very often, or typically, there is one person who takes the lead, either an older person or someone with a lot of knowledge or experience who will be the guide for the others. And the question is how do you decide on what sort of structure to use, what type of form it would be? And I found recently I did a question and answer thing on the internet, and a lot of people said things like, what is the best system, or what is the most effective? And particularly in the case of initiation, it's very, very personal as to what is going to be best for you. But one of the things to bear in mind is that there's two aspects. One is the daily work, the grind that you do, and the other are the actual moments when you initiate, the learning times. And it's a bit like evolution, that you can go plodding away with nothing happening for a long time, and then suddenly you get a breakthrough. And very often the breakthroughs are not the same as the type of work you do. To give one example, I talked in the last one about my inclination when I do a formal initiation is that I preferred to be a little bit in control. In other words, I liked to know what I was going to do, what vows I was going to make, so that I could do them with full commitment and be totally focused on them. But other people preferred just to go in blind, as it were, blindfold into the initiation, not knowing what's going to happen. And I think that's, I admire that. I think that's a very good thing. Because you see, the biggest learnings I've had, the biggest real initiations in life, have been not when I've been in control, but when the unexpected has happened and things have gone wrong. And I find this traditional Taoist diagram helps me in this. The sense in which, the yang has got a seed of yin in it and the yin has got a seed of yang in it. And I find it works a bit like that if you're going to choose a path, choose something that you really get along with and you will be able to keep up. Don't challenge yourself with something that is so impossible, because the real effort will be just maintaining it. So find something you're comfortable with. But be aware that the actual initiatory moments may well be quite the opposite. So for me, you see, I like to be eyes open, seeing what I'm doing. But the actual real powerful initiations for me were nearly always when the unexpected happens and I was caught out. So, for example, if you are very much a sort of whiter than white new ager and everything is peace and love and all that sort of thing, by all means go for a path full of angels and light and all that type of thing. But just be aware, just watch out, because you may well find on that path that the greatest advances, the greatest learning, the great initiation will be when something happens like, you find your whiter than white guru is actually a money-grubbing sex pervert. You could just walk away and leave it, or else you could realize that actually that was the point where you really learnt a life lesson. Or you could decide that you're going to go for the blackest of black sort of left-hand path type of occultism. And yet you may well find that the day when you are called in to do some charitable work or to attend a Quaker meeting, that has the most mind-blowing learning effect on you. If it was predictable, it wouldn't be an initiation. It's these surprise elements that come from the opposite. Now, quite a good start for me is to look at the elements to see what sort of path you should be taking. I looked at the elements in my birth chart years ago, and I'm predominantly fire and then air, and I'm a bit short on earth. And partly for that reason, the initiation where one makes the magical implements one by one was one of the most effective and powerful ones for me. And it's not a bad framework. It may not be work as well for everyone else, but I had to face actually having to make, and in this case it was the cup, the sword, the wand, and the disc. And actually we took a year over each one, which sounds a very long time, but first of all you have to sort of think, what does it mean for you? What is the significance? And sometimes that took a long time before you actually sort of gelled and realised the instrument you wanted to make, and then you're finding the materials and so on and so forth, and then finally you produce it. But that whole process of thinking it through and feeling it through, what does this mean to me, is a very good initiatory experience in itself. And it was nice doing it with a small group because you could see just how different other people's ideas were. Now, suitably for me, being a fire sound, we began with wand. Now, I know some systems, the wand, the fire is given to the dagger or the sword, but in my system, the one I worked, the wand was fire and the dagger or sword was air. Now, appropriately for me as a fire person, I immediately knew what I wanted my wand to look at, no question. I was very much into exploring the trickster archetype at that stage. So for me, the wand had to be very simple, to look exactly like the traditional conjurer's wand. Black ebony with silver ends to it. Dead simple. But you see, in the group, other people were doing the weirdest things. One person carved out of solid wood a sort of thing which had 4 wooden shafts in it, representing the elements, things like that. To me, I thought, well, that's weird, that's not a wand, but obviously that was right for that person. Whereas I just wanted what looked like a conjurer's wand. Ebony with silver tips. So the deciding was dead quick in that case, but then I tried to see how I could make it. Ebony was okay because you could buy these Victorian wooden ebony rulers, so I got just what I wanted fairly quickly. But I had great difficulty getting the silver. I could not get silver tubing of the right size. Now see, if I'd been a proper craftsman, I could have done this whole thing in a day, because I could have just got silver and silver soldered it, and so on. But I struggled, I tried all sorts of people. And then one day I was in a motorbike shop getting my bike repaired, and there was tubing that looked exactly right. And it was motorcycle exhaust pipe tubing, stainless steel. And I thought, oh, pity that isn't silver, that's perfect. And then I thought about it, I thought, stainless steel, what a brilliant sort of metaphor for one's will for the wand. And motorcycle exhaust pipe, how fiery. And so, although it wasn't at all what I'd been looking for, I bought motorcycle exhaust pipe, and I was really pleased with the result. It was just what I wanted. So that shows how, the surprises along the way, when you're open and looking, you find it's a learning experience, just trying to get the stuff together to make the wand. Now, because symbolically, I wanted my wand to be infinitely long, mine's will should be infinite. Well, how did I manage that? Well, a tricky solution. Inside the end of this is a layer of that reflective glass beads, and above that's a layer of luminous pigment, and beyond that there's a quartz crystal. So you see, this wand will be giving out photons. So in theory, it goes on to the end of space. I mean, those photons go on forever until they hit something. And at this end, I embedded a piece of natural lodestone, so I got magnetic field going that way. So, it's meaningless to other people. For me, very important, I've made my wand infinite in length, pride. And although I knew immediately what I wanted, by the time I sort of managed to get the materials and thought it through and everything, it took me a year. And it was a very valuable year, a very learning year, while I was studying all the aspects of fire. The last one we did was the disc. Now, you see, this is Earth, and this is where I was my weakest, if you like. And I couldn't think what to do with a disc, I mean, you can cut with a sword, you can drink out of a cup, you can wave a wand. What the hell do you do with a disc? Now, for some people, that'd be dead obvious. It's money, or it's a tray on which to carry things. And so I was really stuck on the disc. I spent a long time just trying to think what a disc could be, until I saw someone playing a Boron drum. And I realized that this is the disc that would make sense to me. And so I got a sort of, Boron drum kit with goat skin, very appropriate for Capricorn rising. And I put together and I made this drum. And it was so satisfying. This was my year's work on the earth element. And one of the things they say of the disc is it should have your sort of symbol of the universe on it. Now, again, a lot of thought, what would that be? And I was very into the Holy Cube of C.F. Russell. And so, if you can see this is actually a 2x2x2 cube. And the wonderful things that I loved, everything was in that. You've got 8 corners for the 8 trigrams. You've got 12 sides, and so all the signs of the zodiac are there. And the wonderful discovery that when you look at it in terms of triangles, you had just the right number of triangles for the Elder Futhark of the runes. And I had 64 things around the edge, pins, and so the 64 hexagrams of the king are there, and there's a message written around it, and then inside you've got the cross of the elements. So wonderfully satisfying thing to make, all that sort of information contained in it, and therefore it becomes a magical system in its own right, because you can think of, say, for divination, a question, and if you put it in terms of these symbols and then beat those symbols over and over and over and over, you set up a sort of rhythm which you then begin to improvise around, and then you see what you end up doing, and that becomes the answer to the question, or whatever. See, there are many different ways you could use a disc like that. The other thing was there was a very nice symmetry to it, because of course the disc required another wand to be made. I began with a wand, I ended with a wand. And that was, this time I decided to do it, the sort of traditional way. By then I had my sword, so it was a question of being naked at sunrise at the equinox. And I went out to a gorse bush, which seemed a very fiery symbol for me. And you see it has these lovely little knots all the way along it. So I cut my gorse bush and made the wand for beating my drum. Now that's just one example for me, but it shows the sort of experiences, the thinking that can go into this over a long time, and all those things were very meaningful to me. They might not be to anyone else, but so just the process of making the 4 implements was very powerful. There's one other thing I would say, was that before I started, I was stuck, because I had a strong feeling that I wanted to start with a fifth element, a quintessence, spirit, like in the pentagram. And what were there isn't a sort of obvious traditional element for spirit, weapon for spirit, and I decided it would be a crystal ball. That was, for me, the symbol of spirit. And so I went out and hunted and bought a crystal ball, and that I then felt I was ready to do it. So in my case, even before I started, there were conditions I felt were important to me to get going. Now there's a lot of different traditions, even if we just stick to those 4 weapons. I mean, one tradition says that the wand should be found, the cup should be given to you, the sword should be made by yourself, and the disc should be bought. Now to me that's a little too rigid, and yet elements of that thinking went into it. I was always aware of when I was actually making something myself, when I was buying the materials needed, but also what things turned up by chance, like the motorcycle exhaust pipe. Be aware of all those elements, chance, purchasing, gifts to you, all these things that feed into it, and just be aware of them and their significance. I think that's much as I would say about that. I mean, say there's really is nothing more to say, because it is up to you to find what is important. And only someone, either do it yourself or have someone who's very close to you, who really knows you, who might be in a position to offer advice. But otherwise, it's much more important to base an initiation on what you yourself feel is the right thing. And then it'll involve a lot of slugging work, day by day by day. You need to keep up the promises that you made. And then every now and again, something will happen, or there'll be a shift or a sudden breakthrough of understanding. And that is when the progress is made. And ideally, those shifts would happen during the actual initiation rituals, but it doesn't always work as neatly as that.